It's time to play some stuff.
Goodmain's log, number 102715. Things were looking up despite the various trials and tribulations we had been through in the jungle so far. There was now enough of a critical mass of combined soldiers and military forces and freelance adventurers like myself that we could come and go as we please without having to worry about there not being enough firepower left to take on Mordremoth. Our reinforcements were arriving, and we were now given the okay that if we wanted to go take a break and go back to Tyria and unwind for a bit, the option was available. Many of us still chose to stay. And as for me, I decided to try a few more things before exercising my privileges for the first time. Part of getting used to the jungle was getting used to all the treacherous terrain and all the various changes that accompany jungle warfare. One of them was using the gliders and dealing with the bouncing mushrooms, which for whatever reason this jungle has mushrooms that you can bounce high in the air on. But it was updrafts that had eluded me the longest, but at this point I had gotten to the point where my gliding skill could actually make use of updrafts, and it was time to use an updraft for the first time. So, finally, after getting up the nerve, I took that leap of faith and found out that it was exactly like I thought it was. You go up to the top of whatever it happens to be, and then wherever the air stops is where you stop. The next part of my training would involve trying to improve my technique in general and be able to fly further distances without the glider falling to pieces. It was different having to learn how to navigate this treacherous terrain, but, as some would say, it came with the turf. Another thing that this updraft mastery allowed me to do was finally join the team that was up in the jungle canopy, for yes, there were fights to be found up in the treetops as well. I'd been airlifted there a few times in packed choppers, but wasn't able to do too much because I lacked the skill to properly use the updrafts. I was curious what kinds of challenges await me in the air. I figured I would check those out one more time before heading back to Central Tyria to celebrate Halloween. Unfortunately, not all of our threats in the jungle were Mordrim. I was ambushed by a group of tigers when checking my compass and pondering where I was going to go next. It's really a shame to have to kill wildlife like that, but when they mistake you for their breakfast, well, law of the jungle, kill or be killed. Just don't tell any druids that. My curiosity, though, was definitely piqued, because I could even use the updrafts while carrying a huge hammer. I most certainly had to go check out the canopy now. Unfortunately, all the choppers were being worked on, so there wasn't any rides up into the canopy later on. It was then that I figured it was probably time to call it and come back later and try the canopy challenges a little later on. Unfortunately, as I went to leave, Mordremoth decided to pull out his old tricks once again. But this time I was able to use the repeating rifles from the original base. This time around, the explosion was much sweeter when viewing it from the best seat in the house. It was time to head home. As you can imagine, Lauren was nothing short of absolutely thrilled to see me, and that I had made it home alive. She had much to show me. She'd been working on some new skills of her own. First, as predicted, she'd gotten a lot more practical with her apparel. It would not risk snagging any of her fancy dresses on any of what lurked in the jungle, thorns or otherwise. She'd also taken up an interest in music while I was out, though maybe not perhaps because she wanted to get into the performing arts. But being an elementalist, she was curious about how she could combine trumpeting with weaponry and magic. It was then that she combined everything together to form some new skills of her own. Though her style wouldn't be changing as much as mine had, she most certainly would be changing from her usual spellcasting ways. We were both fond of Asuran weapons, but she decided to take things a step further and pick up a strange horn device from the Asura. The horn, which was magical for whatever reason. I have no idea how this works.
Replenish.
You'd have to ask her, she's the elementalist. But some would say that she was releasing a tempest of sound from that thing. Unfortunately, being a war horn, it was kind of limited on what musical notes it could play. But with some of the magic she could throw out of that thing, it was definitely something that could be a force to be reckoned with in the jungle. All of that would have to wait, though, for we had some festivities to attend. The Halloween festivities in Lion's Arch with the Mad King were underway, and we wouldn't miss it for the world. Lion's Arch, a city that had been rebuilt after the war with Scarlet. It looked great when it was first rebuilt, but now all decked out with candy corn and carved pumpkins and all kinds of Halloween decorations. It was the perfect kind of environment for the Mad King to pay a visit. Of particular interest was his clock tower, a puzzle where you had to jump as best as you could without falling into whatever the green stuff is. This is otherworldly stuff. I'm not too versed in it. The Mad King could tell you more if you could get him to say something that actually made sense. However, the clock tower proved to be a daunting challenge for the both of us. This apparently was the Mad King's answer to a game of skill. And a game of skill it was. You practically had to be amazing at parkour just to even make it past the first floor on this thing. Definitely something that a Mad King from otherworldly or whatever, definitely dark, haunted origins could think up. Let's just say that running and jumping in a suit is totally not my thing. And although I was better, I take that back. I wasn't all that great. It wasn't that long until I got booted out on the first try.
Don't try for the Mad King's treasure. You'll be dead long before you're rich.
By the second try, I was very, very regretful that I had worn this suit on Lauren and I's night out. This did not go well, and it was hard as heck to run in. The green stuff warped you out instead of killing you, but I imagine if the Mad King had had its way, it would have been instant permadeath. Yes, indeed. I totally needed to work on my parkour skills. And my skills at running and jumping in a suit. Believe me, if you think that's hard, you try doing it sometime. Third time's the charm, right? Well, not in the Mad King's world. My suit got in the way once again, but I tried to make some progress at the very least. I couldn't figure out whether I wanted to jump to the next part from that gear or this spiky thing. But, somehow or another, I knew I definitely had to work on my running and jumping skills. Definitely took some work. Also, note to self, you cannot ever run in a suit. It just doesn't work. Men, don't try it. It won't work out well for you. She, of course, couldn't get enough of my pitiful attempts to run in a suit, and said, just you watch, I'll do better than you. Of course, she wasn't the one. She shouldn't have been scolding me, after all. Just because she's a water mage type person doesn't mean she always has to wear baby blue. I've questioned her taste in dress numerous times, but only in my head. We all know what happens when a guy speaks up about that sort of stuff. Now try imagining that with a girlfriend who is very adept at every form of elemental magic out there. It doesn't go very well. She did seem to be a little bit more free in her, I was wondering how the heck she wasn't cold in that dress. It was autumn, after all. And she even thought of something that I didn't. Trying to jump on the little block, which got her booted out almost instantly, to my absolute laughter. Of course, we all know what happens when guys do stuff like that. It just drives them to try even harder. So she went running right back in there, determined to make me look like an idiot. It's times like these that I am thankful that she prefers healing water magic. Imagine if she was into torching things with fire. That would not work out well at all. So she tried her best to make me look like a total moron. And would you know it, she almost succeeded. Or so I thought. I watched in horror as she went further and further and further. Further than I did. And just missed at close to the end. She was really fired up now. She totally would not let me hear the end of it until I let her run it again. This was not looking good for me. I was seriously thinking about ditching the suit. Oh, the memories when I think back on all of that. Hell hath no fury. Like, well... We're not leaving until I complete the tower, she said again and again and again. I told her maybe you just got lucky that time. Sometimes it isn't skill. Sometimes it's just luck. I tried telling her that, but you know how they can get. This is why the battle of the sexes thing is a thing at all. And so I watched her pride get the better of her as she had a much harder time than last time and didn't get as far. Yeah, it was not a good night for her. She just refused to give up now that she'd gotten further than me, and I was feeling really sorry that I'd worn this suit. Finally, after enough attempts, we decided that the Mad King's clock tower would be a challenge that we would save for another day. I tried to console her, but what can I say? Neither of us were very adept at those kinds of things. Although I did hear there was a new type of thief out there called daredevils. I didn't know any personally, but I'd heard that the folks involved in thievery were developing some new ways of thieving that involve being a lot more agile. But what can I say? I liked clonking around in tin suits, and she liked throwing As I was saying, she liked throwing spells at everything. Did I mention the Mad King would randomly just shout stuff that would drown out everything else in the town? I have no idea how anyone slept in Lion's Arch with these festivities going on, but we both decided that we would retire to some things more low-key, since both of us had been absolutely humiliated by the Mad King's clock tower that evening. The Mystic Forge was looking pretty interesting. Some people had thrown around terms like the giant toilet to describe it previously, but now with its more cauldron-type witch's brew something or another type look to it, it was most certainly, well, an improvement from what was there before. Even so much as that there was more stuff there than
Time
before.
to do some real damage.
Unfortunately, there was candy corn everywhere. Just about
Magister Tassi
everything that you
also
could
completely
possibly want
destroyed.
made out of candy corn was being
Candy
made
corn
at this
really
festival.
effective Bloody Prince repellent.
Almost can't blame it. You can practically smell the candy corn and whole break. The sea of sorrows might turn to syrup.
It made me wonder exactly what the problems one could have with this candy corn truly was. The Mad King, of course, was a big fan of jokes. We found a doorway that was said treasure on it, but when we stepped through it, we wound up in the cauldron. Fortunately, her magic was able to get us out of there. Fortunately, she knows a teleport spell or two. But it was no fun being in the double-double toil and trouble. There were also witches' outfits available, but she wasn't really too fond of all the bones and stuff. Plus, her wardrobe was already stuffed full at home. Wouldn't be good trying to shove yet another outfit in there that she never wore. Don't tell her I said that, please. I'd like to not get fireballed sometime this week.
Bottomless, my penal beluga. I'd strangle you if somebody hadn't already beat me to it. Oh, can't stay magic, you chummy little tickler. Oh, come, let us eat a few villagers and terrorize a few things, huh?
Nice to see that the Mad King showed up. He makes appearances every so often during these festivities. And this time he took the ghost Quaggan with him. Quaggan are pretty interesting creatures, but we'll save that discussion for another day. Needless to say, the two of us had a blast at these festivities. Despite all the setbacks, and despite her almost getting really mad at me with that clock tower, somehow we managed to simmer things down. Or so I hope. She knows electricity magic too. She could always zap me if she ever wanted to get me back in line here. Nonetheless, though, we had a lot to celebrate and a lot to get ready for as the campaign in the jungle continued. Things were looking up for the two of us. But indeed, who knew what the future held in store? We returned to the jungle the next morning, together, and love was truly in the air. Not just our love for each other, but a love for adventure, and a combined desire to vanquish the mess that Mordramoth had wrought upon Tyria. Goodmane out.